I talk to a lot of people about the 7 different family-sized gardens that I'm trialing as part of this Red Gardens project. And I'm often asked which one is my favorite or which one I've had the most success with, and I always answer the Polytunnel Garden. Each of the 7 gardens has a different fundamental approach, a main idea or philosophy upon which everything else hangs. In the case of the Polytunnel Garden, this is simply to cover the entire 100 square meter garden with a sheet of plastic stretched over a metal frame. The main reason for doing this is to create a warmer microclimate with more suitable growing conditions throughout the year. This can be especially useful in Ireland as it keeps in the heat but also keeps out the wind. By doing this, I can more successfully grow tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, and other crops that prefer more heat than is normally available in Ireland. In this cool and windy maritime climate, it is very difficult to reliably grow these crops outside, even with the hardiest varieties. But they are much more successful growing under a sheet of plastic. If I was only growing vegetables for myself, I would fill a polytunnel full of heat-loving crops and grow everything else outside. But within the context of this Red Gardens project, I'm exploring the question, what if a family only had a polytunnel to grow in? This means that I'm trying to grow a much wider range of crops all year round. This includes the usual tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, as well as all the crops that I grow in the outside gardens, including carrot, parsnips, leeks, cauliflower, potatoes, lettuce, and all of the rest. I'm also trying to be able to harvest abundant crops from the garden over the winter months. For this, I've taken a lot of inspiration from Eliot Coleman, particularly from his book 4-Season Harvest. He has pioneered a lot of simple methods for producing crops throughout the winter in northeastern United States. Some of these methods work quite well here, but others don't seem to be as appropriate with the warmer and less sunny winters that we have here in Ireland. In addition to the wider range of crops, covering the garden leads to higher yields. This is partially because the warm season fruiting crops tend to be really high yielding, but most of the other crops produce better as well. It seems that all plants grow faster with more heat, within limits of course. There's also less wind damage and less damage by some pests, so more of the crop tends to be usable. The extended season and faster maturing plants means that more crops can be grown one after another on the same piece of ground. I'm usually able to grow at least 3 crops in succession each season, and sometimes 4. It would be hard to grow more than 2 crops in the outside gardens without some form of similar protection. Given the cost and the environmental impact of the plastic and metal frame, as well as all the effort that it takes to put up and maintain this structure, it makes sense to try to get as much out of this garden as I can. This naturally leads to a more intensive approach, and in many ways the polytunnel garden is similar to the intensive garden, though perhaps more extreme. But in trying to get as much out as I can, I have learned often the hard way that there's a few things that I need to manage really well, or things can go very badly. Keeping the plants adequately fed has been one of my main struggles over the past few seasons, especially with hungry crops like tomatoes that are in the ground for a long period of time. The sandy loam soil in the gardens can't hold enough nutrients to feed so many plants for the full season. I now add a fresh layer of compost before every crop, as well as extra fertility including chicken manure, seaweed, and soft rock phosphate. I've also started liquid feeding the growing plants, as well as foliar feeding on a regular basis. It's taken me a while to figure out how much fertility is enough, and how frequently I need to top up, and I'm still learning. The issues of fertility seem to be compounded whenever there isn't enough soil moisture, as water stress seems to lead to nutrient stress. Because of the higher temperatures and faster growth, this polytunnel garden needs much more soil moisture than the outside gardens do, but paradoxically it can't benefit from the abundance of rain that we get throughout the year. The full garden under the plastic needs to be watered. There are lots of methods that I could use for automated watering, but for the last few years I've stuck with watering by hand. I fill up a few large tanks, which allows the water to warm up. Then I use watering cans to water all of the beds. I do this several times a week in the main part of the growing season. This definitely increases the workload, but it gives me a chance to investigate all of the crops within this enclosed garden. Ventilation is another key issue, which involves balancing the desire to increase the heat in the tunnel while preventing it from getting too hot. Dealing with high humidity is part of this, especially with the diverse range of crops that I'm growing. I have come to prefer more ventilation rather than more heat, especially with the ever-changing weather in Ireland. This means that the inside of the tunnel is often cooler than the heat-loving crops would prefer, but it does reduce the risk of the other crops suffering. The plastic enclosing the polytunnel can both exacerbate and reduce pest issues. On the one hand, it makes it easier to keep out some animals and birds that can cause damage in the vegetable garden. It also makes it easier to clear the garden of slugs, which are by far the most damaging pests in Ireland. But the enclosed space can be an ideal environment for greenflies and other aphids. They have been a big problem in the past, and I've been quite successful in attracting native ladybird populations to help deal with them. But I am intrigued that there haven't been as many aphids or ladybirds in the polytunnel this season. I'm not sure if this is just seasonal variation or weather conditions compounded by some other factor, or if it's just simply that the plants are generally healthier. But what is the result of all of this? More heat, lots of fertility, faster maturing crops, and less wind damage. All of this leads to much higher yields. Last season I harvested almost 800 kilograms of a wide range of vegetables out of this polytunnel garden, and it looks like it could increase to 1,000 kilograms this season. And that is a lot of food. It's more than enough to supply most families with vegetables throughout the year, and about double what I've been able to get from the gardens outside. In my opinion, this more than justifies the financial and ecological cost of the plastic and metal frame, especially because it's been up for 7 years and counting. But it is a lot of work. It takes about twice the amount of time to manage as it does to manage the outside gardens. A fair amount of this is simply because of the hand watering, but most of it is due to the fact that there is a lot more to plant, care for, and harvest. I'm very pleased with how this garden is developing, but there are a few key things that I would probably change. I'm planning to take what I've learned from the intensive garden and start double digging the beds in the polytunnel, incorporating more compost deeper into the soil. I think it is also time to use a different method for watering, probably a combination of drip line and sprinkler systems. This could include catching rainwater off of the polytunnel for use in addition to the municipal supply. I'm also going to explore covering the entrances with mesh or netting to keep out some birds and insects that have become pests. All of these should help make the garden more resilient and probably save some time, but hopefully without making things more complicated. So, the polytunnel garden produces a lot more than the other gardens, and generally better quality vegetables, in appearance at least. I also get crops like cucumbers and tomatoes, which are difficult to grow outside, and it's much easier to produce fresh vegetables all year round. These are the main reasons why the polytunnel garden is my favorite garden, despite the extra work. But if I'm honest, it's also the garden that I enjoy spending the most time in. I like the heat in the summer, and I appreciate the shelter from the wind and rain through most of the year. I like being here, and I think that makes a big difference in how successful the garden will be. This polytunnel garden is one part of the Red Gardens project, which is focused on helping people grow more food for themselves and others. This project has been unfunded up until now, apart from the sale of surplus vegetables to neighbors. I've now started a Patreon account to help fund the production of these videos and all of my work in the gardens. If you'd like to see a lot more videos like this and to support the further development of this project, please consider becoming a patron. You can do this by pledging a small amount for each video that I make in the future. If you would like to support me, please follow the link here or in the description below. I want to thank those generous people who have already taken the leap to become patrons, and thank everyone for watching.